Okay, before the break, we looked over the syllabus and policies and just kind of previewed a couple other little pieces of the semester. We will see all of this repeatedly. Repetition is important in learning process, so we'll see things more than once, or uh, try to see things more than once. We are under tight time constraints, and we have a lot of stuff to cover. In general, we'll do something like that. We'll go for about an hour to an hour and 15 minutes, take a break, then come back, do another hour, 15 minutes. And on most nights, then that'll probably be about it. So we'll be wrapping up around 8:30 or so most nights. Our schedule goes to 9:45, but this is an active subject. We learn by doing, right? You learn Python by writing Python code, not by me talking about Python code. So we want to make sure there's plenty of time to do stuff. So we won't go quite so late. There, last time I taught the course on campus, there was 2 nights we went pretty late. Obviously, we'll take third breaks those nights, and as we approach those nights, uh, we don't want to break something in the middle of a topic when we have all sorts of diagrams showing what's happening in the CPU and making talking about why something's better than another and why we need to do our callbacks. Certain one way might be preferable for another, in which various situations. And the nights that it's going to stretch out for a while, I will try to let you know in advance that like this is going to be a long night. So or this is going to be a 2 break sort of night. But usually we'll go an hour, hour and 15 minutes, take a break, come back, do about another hour, hour and 15 minutes, and that'll wrap up the lecture time. It's a good time to actively do stuff, practice things. I'll call it lab time. Um, right? It should be scheduled. It should be on your schedule to be for learning Python. So a good time to be productive, learn stuff. I'm big about saying relax if you need it, because if you're exhausted and try to push through the exhaustion, you won't be nearly as productive as you would have been if you would have just rested when you needed it. So I'm a big fan of. I do count that as productive. So if you're exhausted and just need to take that extra hour to lay on the couch and stare at the ceiling and not use your brain for a few minutes, so you'll be much more productive afterwards. So ultimately, it is a productive use of time. And I will try to let you know the 2 nights that last time it was 2 nights. I wasn't expecting one of them to quite go that long, but I'll let you know the nights that in advance, the nights that are going to be longer than that, where we'll probably be taking 2 breaks and be here till close to 10 o'clock. Tonight's not one of them. So we just kind of want to get started preview mode tonight, and then we'll really dive in next week after we get all the software installed. And we were looking at IDEs, so I guess that's the next thing. Choose one. This is the level of class I've often recommended. Try different ones. We have 8 weeks, so do a different IDE every 2 weeks and see what you like or don't like and figure out what you're going to do. Because if you're this far into software development or if you're taking this as an elective, you're one of the people that's going to be spending a lot of time with the text editors. So you want to make sure you know exactly what you're which you will often hear me use that word. IDE is still a text editor, just a text editor with extra functionality in it. Sometimes it is nice to go back to just a basic text editor and get rid of all that clutter. Obviously, the basic one's going to run a lot quicker than a big, huge one with tons of features, but try different ones out, see what you like. I will be using mostly Spider IDE. One thing, most of the IDEs that we'll have for Python, there's idle that comes with every installation. Most of them are like PyCharm. It started out as a plugin for another IDE that was designed for a different language, and then it just kind of grew into its own thing. But Spider IDE is one that I like. It was coded in Python. They got tired of that. It was Python was an afterthought in the integrated development environment. So these guys at MIT sat down and made one. They had data analysis in mind when they did it. So there's some features that lend nicely to data analysis in it. But they coded it in Python. Python was the intention from the very beginning with this IDE. It wasn't an afterthought. That's why I really like it. It's free to use. Make sure you search for when you, whoops, I think I put a link on there. Make sure when you search for it, you put IDE in there. So Spider Spider with a Y, that's some very popular high-end ski gear. So make sure you put Spider IDE because you want the open source integrated development environment, not the high-end ski apparel. Download it. Installer and a couple things. One of the questions did show up. I was doing some stuff yesterday. I'm gonna clear this out. Okay, yes. Oh, there we go. Get back. So you should see something like this. Actually, when you install it under Tools and Preferences, since it's set up for data analysis, it currently installs with Python 3.8. We're on, I just got this new computer last Friday. And so at some point since last Friday, I installed Python and it's 3.12.1. But most of the big, most popular machine learning algorithms are using libraries. There was a big change in Python 3.8. So most of them try to use 3.8.2 or earlier, or really it was in 3.9. So a lot of Spider by default installs with Python 3.8, which I hit apply here. I close this as it still is. We'll talk about this in a second. Just make sure I'm seeing the same thing. Okay, yeah. So by default, it installs with Python 3.8.10. But if I go to my terminal where I will run pip, I hit Windows X to get to that menu if you're not familiar with that. Windows X gets all your control functions, and terminal is on there. So if I come over here and run pip, or we just go to Python, you can see that the one I installed is 3.12, so they don't line up. But we can tell the IDE which Python interpreter to use. So one of the first things you want to do is come to tools. I was looking at the screen instead of what I was doing. Go to tools, and then under preferences, under Python interpreter, if you want to use this one, like I'll be using this checkbox here, we can tell it which interpreter to use. And we'll just browse to where the Python interpreter is. I know where it's at. What I found the quickest way to find it, if you don't know, if you're not sure, when you installed Python, you also installed the idle IDE. So this is what I found is the easiest way to find it if you're not sure. If you open a new file in idle, that just very generic IDE, and then when you hit save, it tries to save it where Python is installed. So you can just copy and paste the address from here. Is probably the easiest place to get it, or take note of it because it is in hidden folders. If you use the default installation, that's what I find is the easiest way to get it. Just open idle, create a new text file there in idle, and when you try to save it by default, it goes to where Python is installed at. Otherwise, it's in hidden folders. So on this PC, did somebody ask a question? It's not. I thought I heard somebody say something. Connor wasn't at the doorway. Let's say that a new adjunct is teaching next door, so you might have questions. Under users, then the user account, there's a hidden folder called app data. So you have to make hidden folders visible. In app data, local programs, then there's where Python's installed, Python 3.12, and here's python.exe. So that's the interpreter. So that's the one you want to point at. That's why I did that idle thing. It's a little bit quicker just to go through that way, because if you install Python, you have idle, and you can just grab from that save box, copy and paste from that save box in a couple seconds. But that's where Python will be installed. So you just grab that and paste that in here and make sure you point at the interpreter itself, python.exe, and hit apply. And after that, we have to restart it. But really all we need to restart is the IPython console down here at the bottom. So you can notice it's on 3.8, but if I just close this tab and the new one opens up, when the new one starts up, I didn't have to restart the whole IDE, just the interpreter. This in particular is the IPython console. We need to run an instruction. I'm doing it from here. IPython is a step up from that standard Python terminal, which I have open here, right? The 3 prompts. We see that in idle, or here I said run the Python interpreter, and we got the 3 angle brackets for switch to the prompt. IPython has this nice little thing here, multiple things. Let me create a new file, and I don't know, make a comment here that says at to do, make an example. I'll talk about what that comment does in a moment. I'm just going to print hello world. I'm here to run this. You can see it runs just like it. We have this better prompt, an updated prompt. It's not that default generic version. So you can see that. If you want to run a terminal command, like say pip from here, you put an exclamation mark and then passing your terminal command. So like exclamation CD, change your directory. That's not a Python command at all. Like pip install numpy. We saw that earlier in an example. And then we can run terminal commands from the IPython console just by putting an exclamation mark first, which that's taking a long time to run. I was expecting some feedback quick. That's the same as coming over here. Oops. And doing pip install numpy, which I don't need to run that one because it's currently running on the other machine. So you can also do that right from here. One that you will want to install, so you can see collected, all the meters ran quickly. That's TQDM. Sorry to pass 7:30. We might not see it tonight. We will definitely see TQ. We will see how to make those meters. TQDM. We'll see that next Monday if we don't get to it tonight. That's one I like to show very early on. But I will. I at least want to see. I want to see emojis first because emojis are part of our language, right? That's a normal thing. That's business. You see that all day in business emails. Last year, the SEC passed regulations that involved emojis, and it doesn't get more formal than that. So it has to be considered part of our language now. If the Security and Exchange Commission will regulate that, if there are government laws that involve sending emojis, certain emojis can count as insider trading. Yeah, so don't send people in the graph and rocket emoji at the same time if you're trading stocks, or if you expect to make a lot of money trading stocks, because that can count as insider trading evidence in an insider trading account. We do have to have some extra things for this IDE. It was made for Python, particular data analysis in mind. You see all the things over here. You got plots, got our file explorer, code analysis we'll see soon. That's for refactoring. It'll look at our code and tell us what to make improvements in it. A file explorer, that's very, very useful. Git integration, we have that anywhere. Any text editor, any place where we're intended to write code is integrated with Git. But have all that stuff. But there's some extra stuff. So we do need to install something. This is what the question was in the chat. So what are we? Maybe make a note that it's about 10 minutes into the second video of tonight, so we can, if you need to reference it later, if you want to use Spider. But we need to do pip. Let me clear the screen so you can see. Make sure you can see clearly what I'm typing. Pip install spider-kernels, and that adds the extra parts that we need for that IDE. I already have it. Yours will have to download. Yours won't say requirement already satisfied. It'll download a bunch of stuff. It'll make sure if you want to use Spider IDE with the latest version of Python, make sure you do run that command somewhere. So pip is preferred install package. So anything that's not in the default version of Python, that's what we use. Pip is the default preferred. The first P stands for preferred. So that's the preferred install package. That's the one that comes with Python. Anaconda is also, there's lots of them out there. Anaconda is probably one of the most popular. I like pip. I've been using that for many, many, many years. So I'll be doing mostly pip in class. But if somebody's trying different things and starts using Anaconda, I can answer some questions about that. I just haven't used that as extensively as I have used pip.
What's Anaconda?
Another installer package. It comes with a GUI. That's what I think. That's why a lot of people like it. So we don't have to go to the terminal and do it. We have a GUI where we can install those other, really they're Python scripts, right? Everybody seen that in the Python language? We looked at where it was installed a moment ago. C drive, users, the user account, a hidden folder called app data has local programs, and that's where Python is, Python 3.12. And then we have this folder libs, oh, not libs, lib, one without the S, lib, that is just full of Python scripts. So, what's a good one here? Calendar is quite readable. Some of them are kind of hard to read, but here is just a .py file. So whenever we say in our Python script, import calendar, let me open this with Sublime. Fixed it out like it's just another Python file. So whenever we do the pip installer, that just copies those Python scripts onto our machine, in particular into this folder right over here called site packages. When we do pip install, it copies and pastes Python scripts into this one. I just open calendar because that's a little bit more readable than some. You can see just a bunch of Python code. They import some stuff, set up a list here, some classes, and it set up a couple of enums, some nonce, and then we get into just some regular Python functions. Oh, more classes, and then again, then some just a bunch of functions. So we would, in our script, we would say like import calendar and then calendar.isLeap. Or we can use the SQL-like notation from calendar import isLeap. And then we can just say use the isLeap function and it returns true or false depending on if we have a leap year or entered a leap year. But that's what the library is, really, or any programming language. That's what our programming language is some keywords and symbols, which you can look at for Python. It's in a file here called keywords. I'll scroll down. Oh, there it is. In a file called, you'll see one of those Python scripts called keyword. Open this with, I'll use Sublime again. You see this keyword.py, it just has a bunch of keywords. These are the words that the Python interpreter knows. The Python interpreter knows this list of words. So from line 19 to 53. So what is that? 42. The Python interpreter knows 42 words and some symbols for our operations, the add or subtract. And then we take those 42 words, and people have spent years building up these other scripts that are just really good and probably going to be needed. So those are included, and that's what builds up the language. So if you might want to look at that list. If you're making like an IDE yourself, you probably want to import KW list to start your predictive text, and then you parse through the thing the code somebody's currently writing to extend that list for the predictive text. But that would be the starting point. That's the words that the Python interpreter knows. And then everything else is just code that's been written with that word. It's layers and layers and layers and layers of programs. And we're here to add more layers onto it. But that's what programming languages are. Just a short set of symbols and keywords that are known, that the machine knows, and then we just start doing stuff with those and build up layer and layer and layer, build libraries, then we import those libraries into new projects, build up new libraries from them. So when we install stuff, so like if you want to use Spider, like we just saw, we use pip, install spider dash kernels, all E's, so not food, kernels, like software kernels, so all E's, no A in it. So you'll run that, and then it will have the all the tools that it needs to run this IDE. So you might see little things like that when you put it you're checking out different IDEs. So like on Spider, make sure you read the official documentation. Probably a good chance to make a point that I'm going to say, you hear me say a lot. Always look at official documentation first, right? I assume by this point everybody knows how to find YouTube tutorials and stuff, right? Always look at official documentation first. So Python docs. That is docs.python.org, because tutorials go out of date. Right? If YouTube's not going to delete the video, so somebody put a YouTube tutorial up, it's eventually going to go out of date. But the documentation is the user manual. It's always going to stay up to date. And when you're making software, make sure your documentation always stays up to date. But look here first. So maybe you want to let me go back to the search so I can find something. Maybe you want to do a slice by docs. I think that'll find it. Slice objects, the Python documentation. We look at the official documentation. You read through this, and like most documentation, and this is the user manual for Python, but the people that wrote this are really good at writing code. Maybe not so good at writing English sentences, and it's not going to make a lick of sense at first. But this is the user manual. This is the one that stays up to date. Tutorials only go so far, right? Tutorials are only introducing things. Always look here first and be like, this doesn't make any sense. Then go do your tutorial thing. So like YouTube, and search for slice in Python. And then watch this easy to follow tutorial, string slicing. Right, makes a lot of sense, only 10 minutes long. But this guy's awesome. So probably watch Caleb's video there. We have one of our homework assignments involves him, and most people really, really like his videos. It's one of the VS Code things. If you weren't sure about the popularity of VS Code on YouTube, whenever Microsoft people that work there have downtime, they're required to go make YouTube tutorials and talk about how great VS Code is for doing that. So that's where a whole lot of those tutorials come from. If you're watching a tutorial and they start talking about how great VS Code is for it, it's a Microsoft employee. We don't run ads for IDEs, so they had to promote it somehow. The trade-off for that is we got tons and tons and tons of great tutorials, because that's what they do in their downtime, and those people really know what they're talking about. So yeah, ignore the parts where they go on little rants about how great VS Code is for that, because anything VS Code does, any text editor can do. Any IDE can do. When it was created, it was actually an open source project called Electron, and when it was created, the nice thing about it was a really nice IDE web application. Microsoft just downloaded that open source project, changed the name, applied a black style sheet, and then started promoting it heavily. So it's used in lots and lots of places, but yeah, getting a little sidetracked there, but it's you'll see tutorials that say that, but then you'll watch the tutorial, make sense of it, and then go back and be like, oh, that's what they were talking about in the documentation. So don't use the tutorial to learn that one line of code. Make sure you use the tutorial to learn to read the user manual, and then you can see the whole thing. You can make sense of the whole picture, the entire thing. Because if you're heading into software development, times you're probably going to need to do some stuff that tutorials at a level higher than tutorials go to. You'll run out of tutorials eventually. So use tutorials to learn to read the user manual, and then you really know the whole language. Might keep that open because I'm not sure if I'm doing anything else in Ivy Learning. All right, so got this running. In Spider, Control L is clear the IPython. Anytime you see an IPython console, Control L clears it, or the word clear. All right, this thing prints hello world. That's boring. That seems outdated for our world, right? Should be using emojis. So that's one I like to show from the first day. So emoji Python. And right on this, right at the top, the Pipel, or some people say PyPy. It's always in a bad font. It's supposed to be PYPL, and it's supposed to be pronounced like people, but I can't say it right. And a lot of people look at that font and think that's a PYPI. So you'll hear people pronounce it different ways. But this is where pip first looks for Python code. So it's like the official repository of things that did not make the default installation of Python. This is the library emoji. They have a few here. Unicode emojis are huge. There are lots of graphic artists all over the world continuing to add to that library. This library is two guys in Mexico City, so they don't exactly keep up with all of the emojis available, but they have a pretty extensive list. See the instruction to install it there. Hopefully no surprises. And then down here is a link to the carpediem.github.io. So the page where the web page hosted off the GitHub repository where they actually keep the code is where they have the list of all the ones they've made. Again, while Unicode emoji list is huge and continually growing by thousands of designers around the world, there's two guys in Mexico City putting those in Python. So give them a little bit of time to add stuff, but there's quite a few here. Control F, so waving hand, and then one of the globe ones, globe showing America. That sounds like a better way to say hello world. That's how I like to do the hello world in Python. Notice it looks like colon, the name of the emoji, then another colon. And I meant to open that in another page. And we can see under example here that what they did is it goes right in a string. Oh, there it is. So we print, and then this function, emoji.emojize, and then the string that we're printing, the thing we want to emojize, we just type that colon emoji name right in the string. So that's a good start here. Let's do pip install emoji. And then this installs for Python. So wherever you're using Python, right here in the terminal or VS Code, that's very popular. I did have VS Code installed on the lab computers here. I can't remember if I said that or not. Right, downloaded, installed. We can see it's version 2.9.0. So when we get to our manifest, we need to make sure and say to include emoji library equal to 2.9.0, or maybe greater than or equal to. But now that it's installed, I'll come back over to Spider and oops. See that comment I put in there? Add to do, and he added this special little check mark. That annotation is something the Python language knows. If we come up to the source code, we have a notice we have a to-do list, and that is a link. So wherever we're at, that does link right back to that to-do comment. Those are about the only comments I put in code, so those disappear by the end. So I don't know. So what you do, the comment and add to do in all lowercase under source, show to-do list, and you'll have a list. Your list shows up right there. So like add to do is make an example with emojis. That's one I like to show right at the beginning. So let's import emoji. And then instead of hello world, we'll print emoji.emojize, and then the string of those two emojis. Waving underscore hand, a space, because we are still printing a string, so it's good to space out the emojis so they don't start blending together, because some emojis do have multiple pictures. And then globe underscore showing Americas. colon in the string. Got all that. Maybe I should zoom in since I'm sharing that. I've got some extra little white space down there. So instead of just printing those words, we should be able to print seems like a more modern hello world. And now that we've seen that in class, feel free to put that in any output for anything you do this semester. Uh, it's part of our language. The government has passed regulations that involve emojis. In particular, the rocket in the chart. So if you do some unethical things on the stock market, don't send anybody emojis with a rocket in a chart, because that does count as evidence for insider trading. Along with some others, or probably I should probably say, don't engage in insider trading, but emojis count as evidence. It doesn't get more formal than government regulations. All right, that program works. Says hello world with emojis instead of words. So the manifest, what we'll do, I probably should save this under a different name. Go file, save as, and I'm going to set this up like a project. So I'm going to go over to my delete folder. Here's where I do all my work. A bunch of stuff here that I don't need. Let me delete that stuff so we can start fresh in that folder. Delete folder. I'll delete this stuff. Being used. Okay, I don't know why that folder is being used, but I'll create a new. I'll make a new project-like thing for this. So file, save as. Go to the place I want to save it. It's delete folder, and I'll create a new folder called Stay High. Sounds like a good name for it. I'm doing it without spaces. So Stay High with no spaces in it, and I'll save this here as hello.py. But now that manifests, our software won't run unless somebody's computer has the emoji library on it, right? We are completely dependent on that. So if I create a new file, try to create a Python file, I go to File Explorer, we can see where we're at here. And the Say Hi library, there's the hello one. We want to create a new file that called requirements.txt. So I hit save. Why did I save? Hit save. And make sure you call it that exact thing, because when you make an installer, the computer will automatically run or try to run code that involves requirements.txt. So the installer will crash. Even if you don't need anything, if you don't use any libraries, it looks like this. You just have an empty file with that name. But we use the emoji library. So let's see what's installed. So if I do over from the IPython console, I can do an exclamation mark, so I can run terminal commands and just do the pip from here, which you do have to install those kernels before you do that. So you will need to go to your regular PowerShell, command prompt, bash shell, Z shell, whatever operating system control terminal you use. You will need to go there and run pip install spider kernels before you can do that here, because one of those things in the kernel is the IPython console. So you need to install that first. But pip freeze gives us the list of everything that is not part of the default installation of Python. So I can just look over through this list and, alphabetical order. And notice how these add up quick. I just bought this computer Friday, and it's already got quite a few things on there. Here's emoji. Oh, there it is. So emoji library version 2.9.0, just copy from that list and paste it in there. And that's all you'll need to do for those requirements. Or if you know what they are, you can say that. Technically, we can leave this part off. We can just say emoji, and it'll just pull the latest version of the emoji library. So really that equal to is more useful for the greater than or less than one, when we want to use, when something was removed or added, and we need to make sure we are before or after that version. But probably good form to go ahead and put the equals in there if we don't. That's what we copied from over here. Oops. Save that, clear them, and I'm gonna come over to the terminal for the next little part here. So what we're gonna be doing is the homework assignments, probably some modules here. You're not gonna send me your files in Python. There's a programming assignment. If I go to student view and do a submission, notice that there's not a place to attach files here. What you can send me is a website URL. So what we're going to do is keep this on, put our projects on GitHub, and then you'll submit the link to the repository. That's the industry standard, right? That's how we transfer code. A big part of the reason for that is it's dangerous to transfer code files, especially Python is an interpreted language. That means it runs from the text file, and most computers have Python installed. So if you were to like email somebody a Python script and it got downloaded, it's ready to run. There's no extra steps to make that run on your computer. So it's a big security risk. So it's blocked in most locations. But the standard way to transfer computer code is through a code repository. So that's what we're doing in class. You're going to put your code on a code repository and just tell me where it's at on the internet. So like GitHub. Student view. So first off, we need a repository. So a repository is actually a version control thing. Everybody's done that thing before with essays, right? Where you have like English essay final, English essay final version 2, English essay final version 2.3. Everybody done that before with a bunch of different files? We don't have to do that with different files. We can do that with the same file. Actually, it's a folder thing. That's what source code management is, version control. We can just make one folder and then do a bunch of different versions so that we can roll it back to whichever version we want. We won't dig into that. The course was just added to the catalog this year. It's going to show up on the catalog next year, but I had to add it to the catalog. So before I can make it an elective, so next year I'll make it elective, or I will go to the committee. I'm the vice chair of the software development committee statewide. I'm going to take to the committee that course we voted in last year. Let's vote to make that electives. I fully expect it to get voted in, but there's always a chance it can get voted down and stuff. That's how committees go. But that course was just added to the catalog, so there is a course on version control systems that is coming soon because that's an important thing. Not just Git, or not GitHub, but actually on Git, which GitHub is just a website that works with the Git protocol. So I'm going to navigate. We'll see better ways to do this. There's GUIs and stuff we can use. So I'm going to navigate to that folder I was working in. So the documents folder, delete, list out whatever's here, and then navigate into that say hi folder. So here is those two files. This is one we want to make this folder a repository so we have different versions of things. Clear this out. So I'm in the right spot now. So I'm going to say git init dot. Dot refers to the current folder. So dot is just the current directory. So git init for initialize, and that just means initialize this folder, dot for this folder, as a Git repository. Open it up, documents, delete, say hi. You'll see there's some not really nothing extra there, but after initializing it, says it initialized it. We see a hidden folder here that's full of all these instructions so we can do version control stuff. And in that new class, it's going to be SDEV 143. The curriculum committee voted it in this year. It's going to be added to the catalog next year. And then once it's added to the catalog, then we can make it an elective on some of the lists. But until then, the local software development chair of each campus has to sign off on has to sign off on it as a course sub if you want to take it before it's fully integrated into the system. Academia moves so slow sometimes. It takes 2 years to add a new class. We have to add a class, and then the next year we can actually make it so students can take the class. But you see, that's a Git repository now, so we can do different versions. So this is the first version of our repository. So I'll say git add dot. So that's add all of the current files. Look at the current directory, and dot is recursive. So any subdirectories will look through there and add any files it knows about. They'll look at them, and then we have to commit to the changes. So let's say git commit, and then -m is a little message, a name, something to keep track of each version. So this is our initial version. And part of the tracking, it needs to know who I am. And most of our Git messages look like this. Notice the error message tells us run these two lines of code before you do that. Can't commit to changes if it doesn't know who we are. So almost all of the Git error messages usually include the code you need to run in order to fix it. So git config global configuration, we want to make user-email, and mine's going to be francis.chris5@gmail.com. The repository I use in class is on my personal account instead of the school one. And then that second one, git config, which this just adds it to a text file. So that hidden folder we looked at, we could have also just gone into that text file and said user.email equals that name. And the user.name for next user.name equals my name, which has a space in it. So I better make sure there's quote marks. I really should have used quote marks on the first one, but there's no spaces in an email address, so you can kind of get by with it. So now that it knows who I am, I can just hit the up button and go back to that commit. Now make that commit until it says there's 2 files changed, 31 insertions. And let's say git log. We can pull up the log of all the changes. It tells us this as we make more changes. So if we added like a README file, let's do that. I'll use my text editor. So Sublime in this folder create something called readme.md. Typically we go with the markdown language. Just eventually we're going to put this on GitHub, and GitHub uses markdown language. So I'll put some symbols here. This might look confusing. So like say hi, 3 underscores, and then I'll write a quick description. And in class, hello world example with emojis. That's a good description on ours. So we save that. So we've added that new file, some sort of documentation to the thing. You can also do the README right on GitHub. That was just, I'm making this example up as I go along, and it made sense to add that. So our repository's changed, so we can go back and add the new changes in and commit those new changes. Git commit, give it a little message. If you leave off the message, it's going to open Vim text editor, which is M stands for improved, and that improved came around in 91, 92. So this is the text editor, goes back to the 70s. Some things are very, very different. Like copy is Y, because when they were coming up with terminology, one of the options was yank and put instead of copy and paste. I always think it would have been better to go with yank and put, but might have gotten old saying that. It might just sound better because that's not the words we went with for the last 30 years, 40 years. This one it predates a mouse, so everything's on keyboard shortcuts. It's a very popular one. We do the commit here. I'm gonna just go Q for quit, without making any changes, and notice it aborted the commit because there was no message. So if you accidentally end up in Vim and you're not used to it, push escape to make sure you're down at the bottom where you enter commands, and then :Q will quit out of that. Or if you need to, if you accidentally do stuff, find out like this, make sure you push escape and type a : and make sure it types down at the very bottom. And then Q exclamation mark is quit with ignore changes and quit. So if you get stuck in there and you don't know Vim, just do that : mark Q exclamation mark and it'll go back out. So if you do it in a terminal, make a commit, give it a message, and this is added some docs. I guess is what I did there. One file was changed, 4 things were inserted into it, and if we pull up the log, the tracking, we can see who did that, when it was done, all of that stuff. Probably want to put our things all on a GitHub repository though. Has everybody encountered GitHub before? Everybody seen GitHub? No? So this is one of the most popular online repositories. This website probably has the largest collection of open source code in the world. So we'll be using this mostly. You'll come in here, set up an account. You can have unlimited repositories with your account. We've set it up. I think there's 2-factor authentication because I'm on a brand new machine, so there's no way I'm logged in. Wait for him to send the code. Oh, I just saw your text, Samantha. During class, my phone doesn't make noise, but when not in class directly, I'll turn the volume back on, and text messages are one of the 2 things that make noise on my phone. So, do the 2-factor authentication. Then we get in here and, well, I need to set up a repository for the class, so I'll go ahead and do that. New code repository. This is going to be SDEV 220-spring 2024. Tells me the names available. We can give it a description, a place to hold in-class examples for a software development with Python course. You know how to README, the description and all that. I'll go ahead and do that. Initialize it with a README. We will get ignores. If we don't want to include some of our code, we can ignore it. That'll be important. We don't necessarily need to do a lot of that in this class. The licenses are nice, right? Apache, one of the open source license. Let everybody else in the world know they find any code on this on this repository that you like. Feel free to use it for whatever purposes. The Apache license has the original authors not liable, so I like to use that one. The top 3 there: Apache, GNU, MIT, top 4 BSD. Those 4 are those open source. Use this freely. Use it for whatever you want. The original author is not liable. So it doesn't hurt to go ahead and click that if you're set up your repositories here. Create this, and this will create a new repository. I just realized I forgot to do the steps on the install. We'll go through that. Your terminal might not have known what Git was. For everything in this class, we can tie this together. There's this add file button, and you can just upload files directly here. Everything we do in this class, that should be sufficient. The only thing that would vary from that is when we do some virtual environments, if you try to upload your virtual environment, but really you should not put in a virtual environment. That is a virtual Python installation. And just like you don't include the entire programming language here, just your code, you don't want to include a virtual version of the programming language. That confuses a lot of people at first because they'll see it in tutorials and think it's part of the project and has to be there and stuff. But your virtual environment won't work on somebody else's machine too. So including it is just tens of thousands of files that don't need to be there. So everything we do for this class, you can just do that here. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Feel free to interrupt me anytime I meant to look at the installation first. When I said that, a couple people came in quick to the chat room and said yes, it wasn't working on theirs. We'll do the installation. I apologize. I meant to do that first. I was very excited. I enjoy programming. Those of y'all in this class, you're a couple of semesters in, do you enjoy it? Sometimes around this level, a little bit afterwards, some of the novelty of being new starts to wear off, and people start to understand why it pays so much. Because sometimes it can be very, very frustrating. Uh, but some of us just really, really enjoy it. Find it fun to write code and see the computer do stuff. So everything we do for this class, so like that hello and that requirements, and just drag those over and drop them here. That should be enough for any of our class projects here. And then you won't have to do the terminal stuff. But the terminal stuff, you probably want to learn some of that anyway. So I put them on the repository. I'll copy that link over to the Ivy Learn so you all see that before long. So they're safely on the internet. So I can come up here, go ahead and close Spider out. Done writing the code for that project. And mostly I was closing Spider because it wouldn't let me delete that other folder earlier. Delete those folders. Delete those folders so I no longer have a local version. But maybe I want to get those, and let me install Git this time so it'll work. You'll want to search for, or you can just say download Git. That's what I usually search for, and right at the top you should see Git SCM. So Git source code management. Git's not an acronym. This was created by Linus Torvalds. You may have heard his name, the guy that made Linux and many, many other things to kind of dictate how all of IT in our modern world. He made this, and he always names things after himself, like Linux, named after Linus. Git is British English for an unpleasant gentleman. Here in America, we dropped the male version. We still have a female version, starts with a B. You all have probably heard that word. We kept the female version, so this is the male version of that. And he names things after himself. It's not an acronym. Or if you're from other English-speaking countries in the world where that is still a word, that is what it means. You can make up an acronym if you look a good one when it works properly, or a couple of bad ones if you prefer acronyms. But he knows he's difficult to work with, but it's Linus for all this. Most IT people in the world will be overjoyed to work with him, no matter how difficult he is to work with. So download the installer. No surprises there. It should detect what system you're on, like most installers these days. If not, just right there on that page, you can click on the other main ones. When you go to run this, though, is it still downloading? Downloaded? Oh, no, it's downloaded. Okay. Message popped up. It didn't show up on the Zoom call. Do you want to allow it to make changes? Y'all have seen that. The Mac one on Mac is very similar. You want it to make changes, and you have to, I guess on Macs these days, you have to touch the fingerprint scanner. If your Mac's a couple years old, you might still have to enter a password. So we'll go next. For the most part, the defaults are good. One thing you'll want to change when you get to the third screen, is that what it was? So the license, second screen, choose options. The defaults will be fine. The third screen, the fourth screen, when it was originally created, they used the word master. A couple things. Some years after that, I guess the general populace has become more aware of how offensive that word is to certain members of the population. So that's the ultimate reason to not use it. A repository is not a master situation. There's not one thing that controls your primary branch does not control the other branches. They're alternative pathways. So it's not a good description. So on that one, you might want to change and give it a different name. GitHub uses main by default, so that's probably the name you want to go with. So other than that change, you can just go ahead and accept the defaults all the way through. It's already installed on mine. Just click next until you get to the end, but I'm going to go ahead and cancel. So that's really the only change. And frankly, it won't hurt if you leave the old version there. It's just right in our modern world, people have become a lot more sensitive to how that word is very offensive. And that word, that is not a proper situation, right? Other places where that's used, like in one method of parallel processing, one processor does control the other processors. But with version control branches, they're just parallel branches. They're separate from each other. So you might want to change that to a better name. And then you'll just open your terminal. After you run that installer, open whatever terminal you use. I use PowerShell. If you haven't used the new Windows terminal application, it's really, really nice. I just got this computer, so I don't have anything, but all of your virtual machines and everything you can put all of your terminals in one piece of software. So you can have several Linux virtual machines and several Windows machines, terminals running at the same time on different tabs. This is another one of those things that Microsoft did really, really well. They're a very aggravating company, but every once in a while they do something just amazingly so much better than everybody else. It's like, oh yeah, that's why Microsoft has their place in the world. And Microsoft's new terminal, the Windows terminal that they came out with 2 years ago, is one of those pieces of software. Fully customizable, you can make it whatever, do whatever you want with it. So if you haven't used that, I would recommend using that one. But after you install Git, what I do is just type the instruction and see if it gives an error message. If it gives an error message, something went wrong with the install. If it gives the help menu, then that worked. I guess the proper way to do that would be to do something like git-v for version, and we can see we're on version 2.43 for Windows. I guess that's a little bit cleaner. But if you get something other than an error message. So I deleted that code here locally, but maybe I want to bring that back down. Like, oh wait, I wasn't quite done with that. Wait, why do I not see the code? Oh. Oh, there it is. So I put the code over on this online repository, Powerful Servers. GitHub is one of the ones that's so popular that those servers will probably still be up and powered long after the rest of civilization is gone. They're really backed up and stuff. So this is one of the most reliable places to put the code. So I deleted it here locally, but I'm like, oh no, I need some of that stuff locally. So I'm going to navigate back to my working directory. This is something we will do quite often. Into the documents folder, and then my delete folder, which I can't try to list things out. That code's on the web-based repository instead of a local repository now. So I need to get that. So to do that, the green button here that says code, you just download the zip file, or there's a URL here. There's this link with the copy button. If you copy that, or you can see it's just a website, github.com, that name you put in there, and notice at the end it has a file extension .git. That file, so the web address with .git at the end for an extension, we can just say git clone and paste in that address. Or if we already had a folder here, we could just connect our folder to that. We can just connect things that way. Now, if I list things out, that repository is back down here, which I guess we can see it this way. So documents, delete. And I could have just typed that here if you didn't know that the address bar on Windows File Explorer, that is like a prompt to your terminal. You don't get any input, so things like cloning, you can just clone the repository and git clone, paste that all in right there, and it would do the same thing as typing it in PowerShell. That can be very, very useful because after you clone it down, you're probably going to come to File Explorer and go in there, and here's that file. You can open it with something and edit it. Whoops, not run it. Open with Sublime. And see that. So that is And then again, if you make changes, print, that's all. It does something else now. I just did that in text editor, so I'll run it here. SDEV 20-spring 2024. We're in preview mode. We'll talk about all this stuff again later. I just changed that in a regular text editor so I can come over here and have the Python interpreter run hello.py, and we get our emoji and other words. Things have been updated. The updates to the software look good. So I want to have the git version control, add, and then dot for the current directory and all subdirectories. So look through here, see if there's any changes since the last version. Add those in there, git commit -m, and call it random addition. Do the code, some sort of message so we can tell which commit is which. Change one file, we added one file. We can pull up details. There's lots and lots and lots of git commands. We have complete control over all the versions. We can go back to earlier versions. All right, I could say this one we will not do in class, but if I say git log, whoops, git log, what? I don't know why one line didn't work. Maybe I want this commit. I want the one line. Git log, oh, -- one line. To make a shorter version of it, I want to go back to this initial version. I'm going to copy that and say git checkout, paste that in, and before I run that, notice we have all these files here. If I run this, come back to File Explorer, notice we're back to that very initial thing we did, which this is the one from GitHub. So the very first thing was add the license to the README, and that code's no longer there. So our version control, we can get back to any previous version of our software or anything. We can do that with any file. It's just we're learning it in a software version. You can do that with your English essays, and then you only need to have one file on your computer and just roll back to earlier versions. Git switch dash. I'll undo that. And now if I come back over here, didn't run. Oh, yeah. Again, there's great messages. The most similar command is this. So the error messages in Git are like wonderful, and they usually tell you what you should be typing. Git switch dash. There we go. There's that. And now the latest, the most recent version of it is back. So that's version control. It's not just a place to store code. So like GitHub, if you've used that before, if you've seen that, the Git part is version control. We can get back to any previous version, see who made the changes, what changes were made. Let me push those changes back up here. So we committed to all our changes and all that. So git remote show origin. Notice it is still connected. There's a fetch and a push URL. It's still connected to that web repository. And we will see this repeatedly. And actually, most IDEs have this automated in there. Or I'm going to show you the desktop software I like to use for this. It's probably built into your IDE. If we say git push origin, push our changes back to the origin on the main branch. So if we have multiple branch names, we can do different branches. So it's not just roll back and forward versions. We can have alternate versions side by side. Git push origin main, and this will push it back up to the internet. Oh, I have to sign in. Sign in with browser, which I'm already signed in, so it should just immediately do things. I don't seem to be getting the message. Oh yeah, no message because I was already signed in. It went ahead and did that. It's like, oh, you are signed in. You can see all those stuff, pushing it back up, how many changes there were and stuff. By version control, it doesn't it doesn't, it stays small. It only tracks the state changes. We have that initial version, and then after that, it only keeps track of those changes. So at the end of this course, this Hello PY will still be on this repository, and it will still be from the very first time we uploaded it. Probably not going to touch that file again the rest of the semester, right? So even though there's many commits made, so it looks like there's different versions that we can roll back to, it only tracks the changes after only tracks the changes. So there's the initial change of creation, and then after that, it's only what is changed in the file. If I come over here and click on that name, we can see green for addition, and there's red for when we remove stuff. This line in green was added on that particular commit. Or on the initial commit, that's the license, that whole license was added. And things are color coded, which we can also do that in the terminal. That's not unique to the website. The website just the website has a nice nice formatting for it. But quick preview on that, we'll see that before long, and we'll also see how it's integrated into our IDEs and some GUIs that we can use to make that a little bit easier on our desktop. Or for this class, anything we do in this class, the upload file button on the website should work fine for you. It's a 100 file limit. So we shouldn't have anything that's going to pass the 100 file limit. If you have more than 100 files, you have to do it from your terminal or a desktop application. Oh, there's only one repository on the computer, so this one that I like, I already noticed that there's it opened right to the only repository on the computer. I was expecting it to open to a screen that said open and browse for a certain one, but it already scanned the computer's like, oh, there's only one repository, you have to open here. We'll see there's different ways to do it, but then you'll just send me this link for your submissions. You can also do the code right here, since I was planning on wrapping up at 8:30, so 2 minutes away, so I only have 2 minutes. There's always been this basic edit button. We can go in and do stuff here. But about a year ago, Microsoft owns GitHub. They added github.dev, which this is the Electron framework in its original format. So if you use VS Code, this is going to look very familiar. VS Code was this launched as a desktop app. The thing we were talking about earlier with frameworks. VS Code is just this, an open source project that they just launched as a desktop, so we can also yeah, you have the Electron framework right there. You all know it's VS Code. I'm just going to say it that way. You have VS Code right on GitHub. That's the name you all know it by, so I might as well call it that. And edit it right there on GitHub if you'd prefer. It's easier. Lots and lots of different options. Kind of preview mode tonight. We saw a lot. We'll see more stuff. Oh, we didn't get to the discussion board. The intro discussion board, I'll push the due date back on that. Has everybody seen that? You can go ahead and do it if you want, but I wanted to cover it in class, at least very briefly. It'll go quick. I put a demo picture in there from a couple years ago. I think I say my age is 43 in the picture, and I'm 45 now, so not the oldest picture I have of those. I think I have pictures of those sort of discussions. So instead of writing a paragraph about yourself, write a program that introduces you to the class. So you see the pictures here, like store some data points about yourself in variables, and then print those out. So I use the printf where you just print formatted and then add the variables right in. That's the syntax I like. Concatenate strings, but instead of writing a paragraph about yourself, write an application that introduces you to the classmates. And when you go to upload it, some people might be replied, so I'm going to try to scroll slowly. Not look at the replies yet. When you go to upload it, make sure you use the embed button. If your classmates have to download a file in order to see it, there won't be any points for it. So you do have to be able to see it, and I turned on editable. So if it doesn't work the first time, you should be able to go back in and edit them. But make sure you use the embed button and not the attach button. That way it just shows, the picture just shows. They can see the output of your software. And then attach the program if you want to, feel free to attach the program. But that's the idea, but we will actually do that in a small example in class. So I will push the due date back on that, but hopefully it's straightforward. So if that makes sense, feel free to go ahead and do that. It's usually a fun little way to get started in Python. Store some data points about yourself in variables or lists or dictionaries or tuples or whatever your favorite data structure is. If you've used a couple, we will talk about data structures in detail in this class. That's one of our major learning objectives. We can do way better than putting things in variables. We can do way better than just using variables and sticking it in the spot in RAM. We can connect all our data together in lots of different ways. We can do one we can put them there like a hash table so that's optimized for electronic components, which would be the optimal recovery time, basically set up almost like, not in Python, but when we do it in C, a hash table in C moves almost at the speed of electricity. It's about as fast as we can make computers run. Or we could do trees where it's very logically oriented. We can do way better than that. We'll see data structure soon, but for now, store some data points about yourself and then concatenate them together in sentences so that you have a piece of software that introduces you. But we didn't cover it in class, so I'm going to push the due date back to that. Probably just a couple of days back, but we'll talk about that briefly on Monday. We've been doing this for a minute, and this is about the time I usually want to wrap up class. All preview mode tonight. We will see that stuff again. Try to run those installers. If you have any questions, reach out to me. I am always happy to help. We can go through this stuff. The recording should be posted on or show up on Ivy Learn here in about 20 minutes or so. You want to go back and watch the videos and get started on that stuff. Sorry about forgetting to install Git before actually using it because it was already installed. But run that installer thing and then do some of that Git stuff. That will be important if you're heading down a software development pathway. That's something that goes in your resume. You want to, anytime you turn in a resume for a software development position, make sure you can say that you're familiar with Git, proficient in Git, maybe even certified in Git. If you want to get the certification, let me know and I'll point you towards. I'll give you the link for the Git certification. They have two levels. The low level one's like $79. The upper level one's a $395 certification and really hard. And I would recommend not even looking at that exam until you've had like 10 years experience project management on teams of software developers. And you're the main Git person on that. But the low level one's pretty easy to get and only $79. So certification looks really good because that version control is very, very important to the industry. Does anybody have any questions before we wrap up this evening? It's all preview mode. We're going to see that stuff again. It was just kind of filling time after we talk about policies, and then we'll really dive in and get started next week after. Make sure you go through and do all those setup assignments before our next lecture on Monday. I'll give it a couple seconds if there's questions. Is there more stuff in the chat room here? And remember, I'm logged in twice, so if you want to send me a direct message, send it to the one that says Chris PC. The one with my full name is the classroom computer, and I just use that for the camera and the speakers. I'll give it a couple seconds, see if there's any questions. Okay, I assume 5 seconds of silence means nobody has any questions. That's probably enough time to reach over and unmute if you had any. If you do have any, let me know. I'm going to be sitting around just waiting for questions to come my way. Oftentimes in the late night classes like this, everybody goes ahead and leaves afterwards. If everybody leaves, I'm going to drive back to Clarksville, so there'll be a 10-minute gap where I'm driving down the interstate, not answering phones. But we'll check messages as soon as I get back to my house. But if everybody leaves, I'll go ahead and head home myself as well. because we might be the last people on campus right now. That often happens with classes scheduled for 9:50. Otherwise, please use our time productively. The next hour and 10 minutes still, hour and 20 minutes should be blocked off on your schedule to learn Python. So please use our time productively. And I'm a big proponent of saying that when you need it, relaxing and resting is productive. You'll be more productive after you rest when you need it than if you try to push through when you're exhausted. If you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, I'll see you Monday and we'll dive in a lot deeper. Everybody have a good weekend.